Drink it in, drink it in, drink it in, man.
It is picked off by the line. Darius Slay's got it. Coming back right side, 25. Picks up a block at the 30. Darius at the 40.
Drink it in, drink it in. Drink it in, drink it in, drink it in, man.
Rolls to the right. Stafford throws deep. Got a man out there. End zone. Caught. Touchdown, Detroit Lions. Marvin Jones.
Drink it in, drink it in.
Touchdown, Detroit Lions. Cornbread.
Drink it in, drink it in, drink it in, man.
Detroit Koolaid, what is going on, everybody? Monday, we are talking fantasy football right here on the Fantasy Football Flavor Show. Coming off the big Turkey Day, Thanksgiving, extended holiday. Lots of good food, times with family. Lots to talk about today. Before we even get into fantasy football, do you think the people that make pumpkin pie sell any pumpkin pies mid-year? Is anybody buying pumpkin pie in the summertime? Is anybody buying a pumpkin pie in the spring or the early fall? I bet you if you looked at their sales reports, I mean, it probably spikes, in that early mid-November right up until Thanksgiving, and then just drops off a cliff, for the rest of the year. But I had to have myself a piece of pumpkin pie around this Thanksgiving time. Turkey, got to have the stuffing, mashed potatoes, all that good stuff. But we're here talking fantasy football. So what I want to do today, I've got a few topics that I want to get to, as well as we'll do the fastest 2 minutes in all of fantasy football and give you guys those leaders and talk a little bit more about that. I'm going to talk about past doesn't always equal the present. I want to talk about how quarterbacks still are showing that they just have low value in most fantasy leagues. Want to look ahead, as I have been, to playoffs, talk to you guys about playoff schedules, weather, kickers, and defenses. So we'll hit on all that on the back half of the show as well. So let's go ahead and do this. Let's just jump right into it. So let me go ahead and get you some of your fantasy football leaders for Week 13 of the National Football League. Now, when I'm looking at these leaders, I mean, this was one I plucked out. Again, I haven't done my percentages, but on my Fantasy Football Weekly article that you can find in USA Today Lions Wire, I swear if you go through the intriguing players, some of my start sits, I had a pretty good percentage working for the year. But Jared Goff had been playing terrible, been not doing much, and I just felt like this was a game he was going to blow up. So Jared Goff, 424, 2 touchdowns, 120 quarterback rating, big time from the quarterback position. Dak Prescott's here on my list, and he's a guy that, I hate to say this, but in one of my fantasy leagues, I tried to get him out of the lineup for Tom Brady and kind of got busy and didn't save or didn't click right, whatever happened, left Dak Prescott in. He still went for 355, 2 TDs, got me some good points there. Mitch Trubisky, oh my goodness, 338 and 3 touchdowns on Thanksgiving against our Lions. Are you kidding me? So those are kind of like your leading quarterbacks for the most part. Work our way down here to the running backs. Derrick Henry doing big things again. 149 and a touch. This guy goes for 150 a week. I've said it before. Darius Geis comes out of the woodwork and puts up 129 and 2 tutties. Oh, baby. Just some other names. Mostert, in there. Melvin Gordon, Gurley, Saquads had a decent day. Let's get to those guys catching passes. Robert Woods, 172. Didn't find the end zone, though. Devontae Parker, again, another guy that just came out of nowhere. 159. And 2 touchdowns for Devontae. Kenny Galladay, an absolute beast. 4 for 158 and a touch. We've got James Washington still doing big things. 111 and a touch. Those are your top receivers, and that's your leaders for Week 13. All right, so there it is, everybody. Nailed it again, right on the dot, 2-minute drill. Got your leaders. Let me go back to a couple of these. Jared Goff, like I said, that's my up-down theory. That's a guy where you'll listen to the GM Shuffle podcast, and all Mike Lombardi does is bang on Jared Goff. They're going to hate the contract, this and the other. Everyone's down on this offense because it hasn't been incredible like the year prior. Like, I just think, those guys still have 3 really good receivers and some decent backups. They have, Todd Gurley, who everybody's down on, who to me, again, what were his numbers? He went for 95 and a touchdown. I mean, that guy can still put this together depending on the game plan. So Jared Goff, I mean, I don't love him as a player, but I felt like he had been down so much and everybody was so down on the Rams that going into Arizona indoors, lots of weaponry, everybody seemed to be pretty healthy. Like, figured he was gonna ball out. Now, let me give you a personal story on Darius Geis. So Darius Geis is a guy I've always really liked. I liked him at LSU coming out of in the draft. I just loved his size, his running style, super young. I think he came out as 21, somewhere in that range. Could catch it a little bit, but basically it was kind of that downhill thumper with some speed and some ability to make people miss and just, seem to have that feature back type of role. So, I picked him up, I think 2 weeks before he came back off injury. I knew Adrian Peterson was there. I know Chris Thompson was kind of there. But I thought I'd tuck him away and just sort of, keep him just in case, And for 2 weeks, he kind of 30 yards, 40 yards. I know he had that receiving touchdown a few weeks ago that he ended up house calling. But my thing with Darius Geis is just the consistency didn't seem to be there. He's there, a 3-headed monster when it comes to running back. I like him as a player, but I just didn't see myself putting him in the lineup at all. So I ended up cutting Darius Geis like right before Sunday. And I think in that league, it's kind of a smaller league, but somebody let go of Tevin Coleman, who I thought was balling out. I thought Tevin Coleman was having a great year in San Francisco whenever he does get the rock. I know they've sort of been, flip-flopping their running backs or going with the hot hand, but Tevin Coleman's had some big games this year, and I think he's had a couple 3-touchdown weeks maybe. He can catch it. If he hits a seam, he's gone. So I thought it was a decent, roll the dice to go get Tevin Coleman instead of keep Darius Geis, and consider that I probably was not going to play him because in that league, I believe I got Zeke Fournette, Phillip Lindsay, I had Geis and Miles Sanders. Miles Sanders really coming on too as looks to be kind of that feature back, really good football player. So I cut Geis, I pick up Coleman. It's just that typical fantasy football okey doke. Like Darius Geis goes for, what I say, 129, 2 touchdowns, running with power, running with ferocity. And Tevin Coleman didn't even play. I mean, I think he had, I don't even know his numbers, but they were just non-existent. I thought, is he hurt? Did I miss something here? Because he was projected in the league to score, in double figures. I looked at his one thing I do a lot. I don't know if you guys do this out there, but is look at kind of his percentage owned. If I'm going for free agents, I sort of want to see who's got a really high percentage owned across all leagues because there's so many leagues out there, but if somebody's 90% owned, 80% owned, that means they're healthy. That means a lot of people have them on their fantasy squad. Sometimes that makes a good filter to kind of get through all these different players and people that are out there. So, Tevin Coleman was 96% owned in ESPN leagues and Geis was in the 50s. So it's kind of like, man, let me go snag up Tevin Coleman. Got burned on that. It's going to happen. Same with Devontae Parker. He's a guy I've had in a few leagues. I liked him 2-3 years ago. Kind of gave up on him over the last year or so, thinking this guy can't get it done. He's got questionable hands. His size and ability isn't translating. I just don't see him being good. Sure enough, this year, the back half of the year, he starts putting up numbers, starts looking like the player but he thought. So, the NFL is crazy. Again, I put in Nick Foles in a league. I think I saw a couple experts after I put him in were on TV, and they're like, look out for Nick Foles this week. He's set up to have a really big week. This guy comes out, turns the football over 3-4 times, ends up giving me 1 point in one of my leagues, gets pulled for Minshew. Um, you know, I mean, we all know what kind of day Nick Foles had. I mean, I guess I gotta summon my boy Charles.
That's terrible.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's terrible.
And got sat down for the young fella. I don't know what's going on there in Jacksonville with quarterbacks, but I guess, talking about these and just kind of giving a little bit more is, the past doesn't always equal the present, and the present doesn't always equal the past. Like, you can look at a guy's stat line and say, wow, this guy's had 4 or 5 good weeks. Like, he's got a good matchup. He should have a good, point total for me. It doesn't mean it's going to happen. You can have a guy that hasn't done anything. Again, some of these guys that come out of the woodwork every week, in Geis's case, he's just sort of coming off injuries, kind of a committee sitting there, and the guy blows up. Some of these, let me see, Anthony Miller, receiver that killed the Lions, 140 yards. I mean, this guy had draft pedigree, came out, everybody loved him, had a decent year. Everybody's high on him coming in this year. Hasn't done anything, injury issues, all types of stuff. Then he just sort of shows up. Cole Beasley, a guy that everybody was sort of thinking he might be okay in Buffalo, didn't do much. Now all of a sudden he's put up 110 yards and a touchdown the last few weeks, it feels like. So Tyler Higbee, a tight end for LA. This guy, is supposed to be the second tight end, kind of a, drafted, I think, in the top 3 rounds. Never does anything. Now he's catching 107 yards and a score. I mean, how many people have Tyler Higbee in their starting lineup? So you just never know. You never know what's going to happen. For all you guys out there, keep your eyes on Miles Sanders. I feel like he's got the lead role. Howard's dinged up. I feel like next year going to be a pretty exciting player to have on your fantasy roster. And even Matt Ryan. I took Matt Ryan out when I saw Julio was down, and Matt Ryan still has a good day. 312, 2 touchdowns, did turn it over twice. So you just don't know. I mean, it's crazy. Fantasy football is nuts. But like I say, don't always make your decisions on what the guy's doing right then, because sometimes you can ride the hot streak, sometimes you can't. You just sort of got to play not only instinct, but matchups, and just sort of, what's your strategy? A lot of my strategy sometimes is, oh man, that guy's a premier elite player. He hasn't been good. He's got a good matchup, and he's probably going to break out, or they're probably going to feature him, and I go with him. Or, man, this guy's been really good for 3-4 weeks now. He's got kind of a tough defense. I'm going to sit him down because I feel like they're going to go in a different direction. Sometimes it works for me, sometimes it burns me, but you got to kind of figure out how you want to handle it and go with that. So don't always base it on what's currently going on, and don't be afraid of a guy that is talented, that hasn't done it, if you think it's a good situation for him to score points. Now let me talk about quarterbacks' low value. I feel like QBs, everybody knows in like an 8, 10, 12 team league, to wait on quarterbacks. That's been the strategy for a long time in fantasy football. You'll always get the couple people in your league, or these couple fantasy experts say, oh no, there's a real big advantage of going and getting Deshaun Watson, Aaron Rodgers, Patty Mahomes. Now Lamar Jackson's putting up big numbers. Like, where people got Lamar Jackson this year? Probably, as maybe their second quarterback or toward the end of their draft. So there's guys every week that put up numbers from the quarterback position because there's only 32 of them. It's really not that hard. If you're in a 10-team league, if everybody has 2, that only means 20 quarterbacks. That still means there's 12 quarterbacks that are out there. Probably 5 to 7 of those are probably cue up Charles again.
That's terrible.
They're probably terrible quarterbacks, but the other are serviceable. So, I mean, just looking at this past week, Mitch Trubisky's in the top 4 basically for leaders at quarterback. Ryan Fitzpatrick, who's been benched, I don't even know how many times, he's up there basically at number 2 overall this past week. Jacoby Brissett, who is like off everybody's radar. Then Andrew Luck quits on his team. Everybody's like, "Oh man, I knew Jacoby Brissett. He's a solid football player. He's a really good guy." okay, if you had him in one of your leagues, you picked him up, congratulations. But, it's not a guy I want to roll out every week. He had like no touchdowns, I want to say, the past 3 weeks. Now all of a sudden he puts up 319, finds the end zone. David Blau for the Lions. I mean, this guy comes out, he's never played an NFL game in his life. 280 and 2 touchdowns. I know I had some people saying he was great. We'll talk about that Wednesday, I'm sure, on the fantasy football or on the Detroit Koolaid Cast, where hopefully, if Grifka doesn't say it, I'll say David Blau was good, but he's not that great. But he's pretty much all the Lions got right now. So he put up numbers. Kyle Allen for Carolina put up numbers. I mean, these are the top guys, and like they're none of the big names that you would expect. I know Watson balled out. I know Aaron Rodgers did some things in the snow, but you're not seeing the top names. So it just proves to me again, you wait on QBs, you hang in there. You know that even if you get an injury, if you're not in a very deep league, you can still go out and get somebody. There's no reason to spend the top 4-5 round pick on a quarterback in a standard type fantasy league. It's just not what you want to do. So let's go ahead and take a break, get our sponsor in here. When I come back, I'm going to talk to you guys about playoffs. I know this last week was probably, where you were kind of finishing up your season, probably getting ready.
Playoffs? Don't talk about it. Playoffs? You kidding me? Playoffs? I just hope we can win a game.
I hope you guys won a lot of games out there. And yes, Jim Moore, we're going to talk all about playoffs when we come back from the break, because I want to tell you guys things to look for. Do your research, how to kind of get ahead of the game. If you didn't do it this year, you want to keep these things on your brain next year for, you're going to make the playoffs. You got to be a week or two ahead on some of this stuff to really get that leg up when it comes to playoff time and trying to win these championships. So we'll take a quick break. We'll be right back. All right, everybody, back here on the Fantasy Football Flavor Show. Appreciate you guys listening to our sponsors. And like I say, make sure you hit up Spotify. If you got dreams of wanting to start a podcast and want to talk sports or music or any of your hobbies that you enjoy, definitely check out the Anchor podcast and see if you can get your own thing started. It takes a lot of work, a lot of consistency, a lot of time, but definitely worth it if you can get your podcast off the ground. So let me go ahead. We're talking playoffs, and like I said, I mean, when you talk playoffs, you got to talk this guy.
Playoffs? Don't talk about it. Playoffs? You kidding me? Playoffs?
I mean, one of the greatest sound drops of all time, along with this.
We talking about practice.
Those are two clutch ones, but like I said, I'm here today to talk about playoffs. We're talking about playoffs. And I hope you guys won a bunch of games this year. I hope you enjoyed listening to the fantasy show. I kind of just threw this together and wanted to just jump on the mic for 30, 45 minutes a week and talk fantasy. Now, I don't get crazy into the stats. I don't give you guys a bunch of, exacts on this show. I try to break it down a little bit more on my Fantasy Football Weekly article for USA Today Lions Wire, where I give you start sits and some more player names and people to look at. But here we kind of talk broad topics, and that's what I want to do today when it comes to playoffs. So there's 4 things I think you should look for before you head into your fantasy playoffs, and you want to be doing this a week or 2 before you get there. Now, I know sometimes you're saying, well, Okri, like I gotta win. I gotta just make sure I get there. I cannot look in 2 weeks ahead. I understand that. Like if you're in really close nip and tuck, you do have to do what you got to do. But there's still ways with your bench, IR spots, certain ways to sort of tuck players away for the future while you're still putting in a good roster every week. So the 4 things I want to hit on when it comes to playoffs is the playoff schedules. That's kind of looking ahead, seeing who your primetime players are going against. And not even so much your primetime guys, because you're not going to be cutting, Dalvin Cook. You're not letting go Lamar, all these people. But you're looking ahead to see kind of who they're playing. Are they playing, lesser competition? If so, you feel good. If they really got tough, hard matchups against really good defenses, all right, who's my backup playing? Because if your backup is playing really hard teams as well, you may want to cut that backup for a guy that maybe isn't going to help you in this moment, but maybe he's got a cake schedule in what are your fantasy playoffs, and it might be smart to put him there because, yeah, you don't want to bench your studs, but you may have an injury before you get there, and you may just the matchup may be too good to not put a secondary type piece in. So a lot of leagues you can easily kind of pull up schedules, look 2, 3, 4 weeks ahead. Definitely suggest you do that. Another thing, this again, I think I talked about it on a previous show, but it's so smart to do, and very few people do it. I think there's a few good websites you can Google out there for weather. It'll show you in a real quick snapshot what the weather is for all the games that week. Now, you don't want to be checking that on Monday or Tuesday of the week. You want to wait till Saturday, even Sunday morning to get a look at what those weather reports are going to be. Because if you're talking about you need receivers and quarterbacks to do well, who's in a dome, who's in sunny weather, you do not want to be outdoors in terrible winds, rain, snow, when everything is on the line. So find a website you like, use those weather reports, look at who's playing where. Are they at home? Are they on the road? Where are they headed? What the weather is. That, to me, that's really important, and that's one that really goes overlooked a lot of times, I think. Just sort of like minutes for kickoff, you see that picture of where your team is playing, and it's not going to be a good day putting up fantasy points, but it's too late at that point. Kickers. They're people too, and I feel like you have to be on top of kickers. You have to be on top of who they're playing. You have to be on top of where they're playing. I'm always shooting for indoor games. I just feel like kickers indoors can boot the ball farther, straighter, have much better accuracy. And for kickers, a lot of times I'll look for a guy that's on a team that's decent on offense, but not great. I don't want to have a guy where all he's doing is kicking extra points. I want to have a guy on a team where he's good, the offense can move the football, but they've been known to stall out. Because pretty much in every league I've ever been in, field goals start at 3 and then start working their way up 4, 5, 6, depending on distance. A couple of leagues I'm in, over 50 yards is 6 points. That's the same as a touchdown. So everybody just may think, I still do wait till the final rounds basically to draft my kickers, but hey, if a 50-yard field goal is worth 6, I'm definitely trying to get a guy that can bang 50-yard field goals at high rate because when you're just getting touchdowns, the guy might have 2 50-yarders in a game. That's like 2 free touchdowns that can definitely help you get over the top. So try to look for those kickers where they're indoors, what's going on with them. Defenses. When you're looking at a lot of leagues still have team defenses. I know in a lot of my leagues, we've sort of moved to individual defensive players. If you're still doing team defense, this is one that, a lot of the websites and people you hear online will be telling you, hey, these 3-4 teams have really good matchups, the next few weeks when you're going to be in the playoffs. And it's up to you to decide, are you willing to get rid of maybe a better overall defense to have that defense that has good matchups? Are you willing to look ahead far enough so that I know in a couple of my leagues, I think it was the Packers. I picked the Packers in a league because I did this. I looked ahead and there was 4 or 5 teams that I kind of had in consideration. I was like, to me, the Packers had the easiest schedule in the worst weather, where you could have lots of turnovers, lots of bad offense. So I ended up snagging up them. I'm hoping they really help me when the chips are down. So, to me, those four things may seem like small things. Like, hey, okay, look ahead, but I'm still gonna play my studs. Okay, weather. Some people say, well, I'm not gonna take out a good player just because the weather is bad. Yeah, you don't necessarily take a guy out, but you definitely want to be on top of the weather. What is it? How do you feel about it? What type of player? If it's a running back in somewhat sloppy weather, maybe sometimes that helps them. I know wide receivers sometimes say, hey, as long as I can sort of keep my feet, I know where I'm going, and the DB doesn't. So they kind of like some of this sloppy weather because they can make one cut, the guy slips, and it's a touchdown. But I haven't bought that recently. Like, I feel like any of these bad weather games, it's pretty bad football, when it comes to points, touchdowns, rain, a little bit of light rain with not wind. I feel like I'll roll my guys out in that situation. But we start getting into snow, we start getting into just crazy wind gusts. Yeah, I'm probably sitting those guys down because in most leagues you probably have a comparable option. If it's a big drop off, you're talking about sitting down, Pat Mahomes and going to, gosh, a mid-level quarterback. I mean, I'm not doing that, but if it's if it's the Jared Goffs or the Dak Prescotts of the world, and the step down is like a Matt Ryan indoors with Julio and all of his other parts, maybe I'm going with Matt Ryan in that situation. So you want to be on top of that. Your kickers to me get forgot about all the time. I even like to have two kickers towards the end of the year if I got open roster spot, because then I can pick between the two. Maybe I'll have like a Matt Prater and a Justin Tucker. Like, I don't want to sit Justin Tucker down, but he's playing in some terrible weather in Baltimore, and Matt Prater's at home for the Lions in great weather, and he can bang those 50-yarders. Like, maybe I'm rolling Matt Prater out there. That's an example. And then, like I said, the defense, the leagues where I had it wrapped up, I went and got that defense that has a nice schedule. Usually weeks, what are we in? We're heading towards week 14, so most leagues, your final week is week 13, 14, 15, 16 are kind of those main playoff weeks. So you just look at that schedule and you try to get the best defense. And again, defense comes down to turnovers, sacks, point totals. So who's going to keep people low points on the scoreboard, and who's going to turn the football over is really, if you get a touchdown defensively, that's always just a bonus in my opinion. But like I said, this is the time that counts. I think the part that's hard about fantasy football is you play these 12, 13 weeks of football. You're trying to win every week. You're super competitive, and really it comes down to these couple weeks. How is your lineup? Is it hurt? Is it not? Did you look ahead? Are you ready to go? Who do you play? Sometimes in your league, it's like, oh, I'm going to play that team in the first round. Like, I don't want to see them. And vice versa, like, oh man, I got lucky. I got to play that team. I could beat them and get to the championship type of feel. So, good luck to everybody out there. Like I say, hopefully this has been kind of fun and just informal. Like I say, just talking fantasy football like we would if we're sitting in a room, not going crazy on stats. I know you can find all that stuff by Googling it or going to some of these other websites, but I think it's going to be super important for you to look at those four factors, as well as not get caught up in the past or the present. Just sort of use your judgment and look at all the different factors. Always know that if there's a spot you can burn, it's usually quarterback. When you're talking about drafting as well as in season, you want to really get aggressive and cut bait. Maybe you just go down to that one quarterback, your starter, and you can add another position piece, whether it be running back, wide out. I don't suggest adding another tight end because there's probably not any elite ones out there. But yeah, I definitely cut a quarterback to get another running back or receiver that may help me down the line. You never know what kind of injuries can hit you. And we went over those fantasy leaders. So heading into week 14, again, getting back to some normalcy. We just got the one Thursday game loaded up on Sunday. No bye weeks, no nothing. Should be fun. I know don't know if I'll be in any playoffs I guess I will. I think I'll be heading into one or two leagues where we'll be heading into playoffs, and another couple where we actually wait another week. So 15, 16 type thing is kind of how we shake out a couple of my leagues. You don't want to get into week 17. I may have mentioned that before, but some people are like, oh, our league goes all the way to week 17. We want to get all we can out of fantasy football. It's like, no, what you're really asking for when you do that is, you thinking it's a good idea, and then your team makes it to the championship one year, and because you had a baller either at quarterback or running back on a really good team, they end up sitting out week 17. Now you're playing the championship without the guy that got you there. That's not what you want to do, and rarely does it happen, for 2 weeks, so that's why I feel comfortable about ending in week 16. But you push it to week 17, you're asking for trouble. And like I said, it always sounds good until it happens to you. and that's a big issue, for whoever got jobbed just because somebody sat down on a bye week. So keep all that in mind. Enjoy fantasy football for a couple more weeks, and we'll be back here next week talking all things fantasy football, and on Wednesday and Friday, all things Detroit Lions right here on the Detroit Koolaid Cast. Take care, everybody.
Pack the bag, start the plane. This game is over. It is over. What a comeback by the Lions.
Drink it in, man.